Hello, Dancing with the Stars fans. I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with our contributors Jeffrey Kare and Cordell Martin to talk about the latest episode of Dancing with the Stars, Disney Night, which was the third week of competition and the second elimination. The first elimination was Charles Oakley, which we discussed last week, and the second elimination, perhaps surprisingly, because the bottom two scoring contestants were the first two to go. We haven't seen that happen in a while. So the second elimination was Carole Baskin, the Tiger King queen of the big cat lady, who danced the Circle of Life in a costume that was extra. And I want to give extra kudos to Pasha Pashkov, her partner, for being such a good sport the entire season with her and being so generous to her as a partner. So first off, Cordell, what did you think about that elimination?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised. Once we found that she was in the bottom last week with Charles, to me, it just showed that she just didn't have the support from viewers and fans like past controversial stars that appeared on the show. So I knew her time was coming, unfortunately, this week.
Yeah, what did you think about that, Jeffrey?
Well, I echo what Cordell said, and I also like to add that, for the first time in a while, the consistently weaker couple has been eliminated before they ended up overstaying their welcome, so thank goodness for that.
Yeah, and it is so strange. As I mentioned, we haven't seen it in a while where the bottom couples are actually the two, like, or not only the ones that go, but the ones that are like the bottom two. So even this week, Anne Heche had the second lowest judges score. She was also in the bottom two. And it hasn't been that consistent in a while. I wonder if it could be a factor of how many celebrities there are. Just how many there are. There's enough division in between the fandoms and the fan bases that they're just sort of they're not weighing enough against the judges' scores to completely overrule them like they had done with Sean Spicer and Grocery Store Joe. So I wonder if things are going to start to get screwy once we get down to like 11 or 10, and then we'll start to see some perfect 10 dancers getting eliminated, or your Vanderbeeks, your Tinashes, those sorts of weird happenings. Do you think that's gonna last, Cordell? Do you think it's gonna get screwy again, or do you think this might actually be a more consistent season in terms of the viewer votes?
I mean, I think it'll probably be consistent up to about the halfway mark, just because there's a lot of couples that are just kind of that lower tier. So I think, we'll probably see, unfortunately, Anne in the bottom two next week, and she'll probably go home. And whoever's the other couple that joins her in the bottom two, it just might be, just rinse and repeat until like halfway point where the competition will be a lot stiffer.
And another interesting thing about this week's episode was that you had uh, two new contestants at the top of the leaderboard, which means in 3 weeks of competitions, there have been 5 different people on the top of the leaderboard. This week it was Neve Schulman and Johnny Weir. Last week it was Caitlin Bristow, and in week 1 it was Justina Machado and Sky Jackson. And those two were actually close to the bottom of the leaderboard this time around. So things are just veering in wildly different directions. Do you think this is a really completely wide open race, Jeffrey? Like, are your predictions for who will win just kind of thrown out the window?
Well, I currently have Caitlyn in my number one, but that could easily change throughout the season. I mean, this season so far has been really interesting because it changes week by who's in the top, who's in the bottom. Which, hey, that should at least make it more fun to talk about as we go along.
Yeah, what do you think, Cordella? Are your predictions constantly in flux, or do you feel like someone is rising to the top more than others? Because Neve and Caitlin, I will say, over the course of the season, are currently tied for the highest cumulative judges scores for the entire.
Yeah, to Jeffrey's point, I mean, this is a very wide open season. For me, it's just tough as someone who's watched the show for a long time. I can kind of gauge who's like those top 3 contenders. And each week it's just like someone drops and then someone rises to the top. Like I initially counted Johnny out, but then this week, like he brought it, and so you just don't know. And I love that, which is great because the last few seasons have been kind of somewhat predictable in the sense, but with just the crop of contenders and just seeing everyone's growth, it's exciting to watch as a viewer.
And as I mentioned, Sky Jackson and Justina Machado, who were so strong in the first week, and Justina again in the second week. Sky struggled in the second week. They both sort of, struggled again this week. Although I don't know if they struggled as much as their scores would indicate, because they performed early in the night. I was scared for both of them because they didn't get the enthusiastic judges' scores. They also didn't get panned. Like the judges were like, that was good, but maybe you could do a little better and that sort of thing. So I was like, oh, by the end of the show, I gave both of them all my votes. I was like, I am not seeing either of these two go home early. Do you think, Cordell, that there's this kind of inflation as the night progresses where the scores keep going up? Because I feel like if one of those early night performances, if it had been at the end of the night, it would have been 2 to 3 total points higher from the judges.
Yeah, I'm starting to notice that trend with this season in particular. Because to your point, I mean, the couples that have gone in the first half of the show tend to get dinged a lot more than the other couples. Carrie Ann might call out a lift for a particular routine in the beginning of the show, and then towards the end, she's like, "Oh, whatever, I don't care." And so I think they tend to get a little relaxed in terms of just their scoring. And I guess it could just also just depend on the couples. I think they're trying to make sure that they're being fair to each couple and not consistently, showering them with praise, but also not criticizing them every week. For example, like a Nelly, in past seasons, Nelly probably would have received 4s and 5s if Lynn was, at the judges' table. But you can see that
for the shoes alone.
Exactly. But you can tell the judges are, pretty easy with them in terms of their scoring and critique. So,
yeah. What have you thought about the scoring, Jeffrey? Do you think it's been consistent or has been a little bit lopsided?
Well, I mean, I think some people have probably gotten scores that are a little lower than they should have received. And I agree that, yeah, I think it'd be nice if, people like Sky or Justina, went on a little, hopefully a little later in the night next week or so. I mean, I'm sure it probably has a lot to do with it, though. And then again, uh, I mean, it was, funny how, just before getting eliminated, Carole Baskin received such a low score.
Yeah, it was, it was a little surprising. I was a little miffed at Carrie Ann because she gave Carole Baskin a 5 for the samba, which was the same score she gave Sky last week for the samba. Sky made one mistake in her samba, and Carole Baskin's performance, bless her heart, was just kind of an entire mistake. And so it felt a little weird that they're holding Sky to a different standard, because in week 1 they saw she's got the skills, and so if they don't see her bringing that level every single time, she gets a 5. But Carole Baskin is vaguely on the beat, and she gets a 5, which I don't begrudge Carole. I mostly think that Sky's been underscored, and I agree. I hope she and Justina are like the last 2 dancers next week, because they deserve that pimp slot. Like this past week, Chriselle Faust got the pimp slot at the end of the night, and it's just like, why her and not these two who are such amazing standouts in night 1? Caitlin Bristow, of course, last week had that slot at the end of the night where she made full use of that sort of drama around her ankle. It's like, I can go on, and then she dances perfectly and she gets the high score. So Justina and Sky, I think, are at risk of getting lost in the shuffle, especially if the producers lose them in the shuffle. Like, these are 2 of the stars of the season, and they need to not go home early. If they have to, throw out some votes, or get the Proud Boys to patrol the phone lines or something like that, just so the election is not rigged, or to rig it, or rather to rig it for Justina and Sky. I highly approve of that strategy. So yes, I'm a partisan for those two. Although I really like a lot of people this season. I think Neve is, I see him in the finals right now, but it's of course really early. He strikes me as one of those surprises that's like, based on his background, you wouldn't guess that he has the dance skills, like a Frankie Muniz, so like, who else are you liking, Cordell, in the season from what you've seen so far, either to win or just personal favoritism?
Yeah, I would say some personal favorites. Neve, of course. I think he's definitely been a surprise, a pleasant surprise for me. Justina, I just love her energy. I think it's just one of those personalities that you gravitate towards. I love Sky. I'm hoping that she can rebound, because my fear is, these past 2 weeks haven't been the best for her. And, she's going to need, some killer dances in order to be competitive, to make it in the long run. I also love Jeannie and Brandon. I think they're a cute partnership. I love their dance. Let's see who else. I love AJ. And I would say, that's about it. But everyone else I enjoy, but those are probably my favorites right now.
Yeah. Who are your personal favorites, Jeffrey?
Well, I've been enjoying AJ. I think he's so far been improving. Like, I thought he and Cheryl did very energetic work this past week. I think Justina's been doing pretty good. So has Caitlin and Sky and Johnny, I think, has been doing very well. And I've also enjoyed Neve as well as Janine, and Monica. So yeah, I think who's left now have all done, range from pretty good to almost great, and yeah.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing about this season, is almost anyone in the cast could conceivably go from the top of the leaderboard to the bottom at this point, or the other way around, because they all have sort of that general capability. Like even Anne Heche, who was next to last on the leaderboard with Carole Baskin this week, she's got she has the ability. Like she's not necessarily the most expressive. I think she could open up a little bit more, but like she has the capability to hold her own out there. So there's no one in this competition who is guaranteed to fall to the bottom or guaranteed to rise to the top, which makes it really difficult. I also love Jeannie. Her and Brandon's chemistry is one of those kinds of things that that kind of fuels a partnership, especially on the show, where getting to know the couples and their relationships to each other is part of the fun. Showmances notwithstanding. Although if they decide to do an Anne Heche and Keo showmance, because it feels like Anne is crushing hard on Keo, I'm actually here for it. I'm here for it. One thing that we didn't discuss last week that I thought we could dive into this week, one of the huge changes, or two of the huge changes going into this season of Dancing with the Stars from previous seasons, was Tom Bergeron and Aaron Andrews are gone, and in their place Tyra Banks. And Len Goodman wasn't able to travel back from the UK due to COVID, so Derek Hough is in the judge's chair in his place this season. Let's start with Tyra, a controversial figure. I know a lot of people gave her flack on America's Got Talent, and I know our comment sections, in basically every week, there are at least a few people who are like, get rid of Tyra. I honestly think there's so many dancers on the show still that they're just moving so fast through the entire show that she hasn't had that much time to do really great or do really terribly. I will say that I don't think her interview questions to the celebs are always the most natural, or I don't want to say inappropriate. They don't feel like they flow from the moment. Like it feels like, why are you asking me that from time to time? What do you think about her so far, Cordell?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still confused as to why she was named the host and executive producer. It'll be one thing if she was a former contestant or had some dance background um, to kind of, legitimize the producer's decision in hiring her. Um, I don't know. I just don't think right now, and to your point with all these couples, that she's been able to find her groove yet. I don't know if she'll be able to as the season progresses. I know one thing, sometimes she can be a bit dramatic for me, especially with the outfits. It's a little distracting. Like the outfit this week, I was like, Tyra, like, what's about you?
She's trying to get the RuPaul costume Emmy just on her outfits alone.
Oh, that is her goal. She's going to make sure Dance with Stars, reclaims an Emmy in some form. So, you, Tyra.
What have you thought about her, Jeffrey?
Well, so far she hasn't really been getting in the way of the show, but that being said, it does look like she still needs some getting used to. But yeah, I mean, I think, more suitable choices to replace Tom. Well, I mean, for one, I think, maybe Tom deserves like at least big season blowouts. That way people tuning in will be aware this will be his final season. But if you had to replace him, there's so many that I think would have been better suited for the job, like Alfonso Ribeiro or Frankie Muniz or Jordan Fisher or Julian Hough. Those. But I mean, in fact, I even shared an article from Deadline interviewing the showrunner earlier today in our group chats that he was talking about how Dancing with the Stars needed change and stuff like that.
Yeah, it needed change, but I feel like every time the producers in the last 2 seasons or so have decided, let's change something, it's always like, no, nobody wanted that change. Like, that was one of the things we liked. I do like the judges save a little bit, because especially when the choices are better, like if it's between Charles Oakley and Carole Baskin, it's like, okay, we're sorry, but if we pick one of you to go, it's fair and just. And the same thing with Carole and Anne, it's fair and just. If next week, not to harp on it too much, if the choices are Sky and Justina, it'll be like, no. But I do like the judges save in theory, so I like that they brought that back. But yeah, just I don't know. Yeah, I'm also still on the fence about Tyra. Although I do think the rest of the season with the COVID precautions have gone pretty smoothly. And I also think Derek has actually been a really great addition to the judges table. He's not as withering as Len, but he's also not a pushover. Like every once in a while, the show gets guest judges in, and they're always like kind and lovey-dovey and all supportive, and they give the highest scores. But Derek has kind of gone back and forth. Sometimes he has higher scores on average. Other weeks he's had lower scores on average. And his critiques are always sort of on point. Not that I'm an expert on like exactly the advice he's giving to the celebrities, but he's very specific and he's very supportive. And like he'll look at you and say like, this is what you're doing really well, but this is what you can clean up to get better. And it sort of makes it very clear how he won 6 Mirrorball trophies, because if he has that ability to pinpoint the strengths and weaknesses of these amateur dancers, that shows why he's been able to get 6 of them to the Mirrorball trophy. So what have you been thinking about him, Cordell?
Yeah, I thought he was a great addition this season. I think with his background, of course, in ballroom and as a former pro, I think he finds a great balance at appreciating, the technique and the traditional, styles that comes with those dances. But he's also hit with what's in now, trendy and contemporary, that he's not as, stuck in his ways like Len. With Len, he's so old school that if you're doing anything that's remotely trendy, hip, he's against it. But Derek appreciates, the variety that people bring to those routines. And then to your point, I love how he's great at pinpointing things they can improve on without being mean and malicious. Because for a lot of these stars, they're putting themselves out there, and for a lot of them, never dance, in front of millions of people, and it's a scary thing to do. And so he has that, very comforting presence for those stars to say like, you got this. This is what you need to work on, and just keep going. So it's very encouraging, I think.
What do you think about him, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think he's been a great addition. Like, it's nice to have someone who's competed for the Mirrorball Trophy many times before, because he's someone who understands what it's like for the contestants, what they've gone through, what they're going through. So that's been really nice to watch him judge people on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, and actually, now that I think of it, if he weren't so good as a judge, I'd say he would be another person who would have been actually a really great host if they had gone in that direction, because he has that screen presence. He's used to being on TV and performing for an audience. He has that kind of charisma, and he also has that relatability to the contestants and the other pros and the stars, and I feel like, it's, everyone is good but Tyra, but I'm still willing to give Tyra a chance as the show progresses, because it's still early and these episodes are still incredibly crowded. I feel like we're bound to have a double elimination sometime soon, just because it's almost like clearing the way the forest brush, or else you could have like a giant forest fire at the end. Just got to get a few away like soon. Because these episodes, like, if it's going to be 2 hours long, it just feels like we're running through clip packages, we're running through the judges. The judges have to rush to get their paddles out. Yeah, and it just feels like it's moving so fast. Far be it for me to ask for like an extra, like if it had an extra half hour of just like wiggle room, the show, it would feel a lot looser, and so when it gets back down to like the usual crowded 12 or something, then it'll feel a little crowded, but not as crowded. And yeah, I'm really just looking, like, I don't want to see people go, but I want to get to know the people we have better. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to the later in the season when we're down to like 8, 7, 6, when we can actually get a sense of who these people are and what their partnerships are like, even more than we have, because the clip packages are like a minute a piece. Yeah. Well, with that, I want to thank you, Cordell, and thank you, Jeffrey, for joining me for this week's discussion. And I want to thank everyone out there for watching. We will be back with you next week to discuss the next episode of Dancing with the Stars and the next elimination. We'll see if it's Anne Heche. We'll see if Anne Heche goes to the top of the leaderboard, or if someone is horrendously eliminated early. I'm still, like, I feel like they're giving us a false sense of security with these early eliminations being so consistent. But until then, we will surely have lots to talk about. We will see you then.